They never saw the storm growing behind your silence. While they basked in false victories, mocking your quiet strength, something ancient was aligning itself in your favor. Not out of revenge, but out of balance. The very forces they tried to manipulate have now turned inward, wrapping around them like a mirror that doesn't lie. And the truth they once buried beneath laughter and gossip? It's digging its way to the surface, louder than ever. The path they thought led to your ruin has begun folding beneath their own feet. There were moments when swallowing your truth felt like the only way to stay sane. Not because you lacked the courage to speak, but because the air was rigged to choke you if you did. Behind closed doors, kindness became a liability. You weren't walking on eggshells. You were stepping over traps disguised as affection. Every concession they praised as maturity was another thread pulled from your soul's tapestry. Not out of humility, but as a survival tactic against minds that turned every disagreement into a courtroom. And now, that courtroom is crumbling under the weight of its own false evidence. There are entire strategies built around your light, designed not to destroy it instantly, but to siphon it slowly. Some people didn't come into your life for connection. They came with quiet calculation. They watched the way you handled silence, observed how deeply you felt, and tested how far you would go to preserve peace that only existed on the surface. What looked like affection was often surveillance. And while you were giving without keeping score, they were taking without shame. It was never just about emotional conflict. It was about access. And not everyone who wanted to be close to you deserved a front-row seat to your soul. They mirrored your kindness to earn your trust, then reversed the mirror to make you doubt your own reflection. Over time, you were conditioned to shrink whenever they flinched, to retreat whenever they fabricated harm. Their weapon wasn't rage, it was the ability to make you feel guilty for simply existing in your truth. They painted themselves as fragile just long enough to justify controlling the room. And with every staged breakdown, they bought sympathy from anyone who didn't know the full picture. They called your strength aggression. They called your honesty disrespect. Behind your back, they curated a network of believers, people who only heard one version of events, and who unknowingly became mouthpieces for a lie. It wasn't just manipulation. It was a slow campaign to isolate the one person who threatened their illusion. But illusions collapse when the light stays consistent. And you kept glowing even when they tried to dim you through doubt, guilt, and narrative control. What they never understood is that your silence wasn't submission, it was observation. And now that you see it clearly, the entire system they built around your confusion has begun to fold under its own deception. What they once called strategy is now unraveling as exposure. The game is over, not because you fought harder, but because you finally stopped playing. They didn't just want your attention, they wanted access to the deepest parts of you. So they wore pain like a disguise and played the part of someone in need. What they really wanted was a backstage pass to your spirit. And once they got it, they didn't just stand there in awe. They started rearranging the furniture of your soul. They studied how you showed up in love, how your heart broke open instead of shutting down. They didn't misinterpret your empathy, they targeted it. Over time, the performance became a campaign. They cast themselves as the misunderstood, the mistreated, the ones who barely held it together because of your supposed cruelty. And they broadcast that script to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, they quietly rewrote your story in rooms you were never invited into, until the people who once stood by your side began looking at you like you were the problem. They didn't just want to drain your energy, they wanted to rewrite your identity. And yet, while they were busy building a lie, something else was building inside you. Every time they twisted your care into captivity, something ancient inside you took notes. You weren't just surviving, you were storing. Every loss became a signal. Every moment of silence thickened your intuition. Every betrayal recalibrated your discernment. What they mistook as your breaking point was actually your gathering ground. The pressure didn't crush you, It taught you how to move differently. They thought they'd erased your power, but all they did was dig the foundation for something bigger than their comprehension. The lies they sowed became seeds of their own unraveling. And the very system they created to discredit you now stands as the loudest proof of your strength. The scales didn't tip in your favor. They were never off to begin with. Time was simply allowing the truth to grow roots. And now that truth is shaking the ground they once stood on. They built their empire on silent surveillance, tracking your growth like it was a threat, not a triumph. But what they didn't account for was the reversal embedded into the very fabric of spiritual law. The same systems they used to observe your transformation have begun recording their own unraveling. Conversations they thought were sealed are leaking through cracks they can't plug. What once served as their hidden weapon has now become a megaphone, echoing their downfall in rooms they can't control. The very tools they use to target you are flashing warning lights back in their direction. But the deeper collapse didn't come from outside exposure. It came when the invisible hands that once shielded them simply let go. The forces that had once buffered their recklessness, the ones that hoped they'd choose differently, have drawn the line. There comes a moment when even the most forgiving forces retract their grace. When the soul that once received guidance no longer answers the call. And now, they walk alone, severed from the spiritual infrastructure that once delayed their consequences. Their body is speaking what their mouth refused to confess. Systems are breaking down without cause. Doctors scramble to name what spirit already diagnosed, a full rejection of everything they became. Not because of illness, but because their essence has turned on itself. There's a timeline written into their bones now. A window to come to terms with the truth they refuse to face. A countdown, not to destroy them, but to show them what it means to try to break a vessel chosen by something eternal. And while the body falters, so does the illusion of control. The wealth they clutch to feel powerful is vanishing through holes they can't patch. The allies they once bought are switching sides, realizing the ground beneath is no longer stable. Funds freeze. Legal walls close in. And everything they once called secure is slipping through their grasp like dry sand. They thought they had time. They thought they had protection. But you can't outrun the return of what you've sent out. And when you target what is sacred, the whole universe remembers your name. Some alliances were never rooted in love, just shared convenience. And when the storm finally shifted, the ones who once helped orchestrate your downfall were the first to disappear. Not because they found remorse, but because they sensed the structure collapsing beneath their feet. They didn't walk away in shame, they ran with urgency. The false loyalty they paraded was nothing more than self-preservation waiting for the right moment to activate. And when the weight of truth grew too heavy, they left behind the one who started it all to carry the fallout alone. Now the puppet master is left with no strings to pull. The circle that once echoed every lie has dissolved into silence. Without applause, there's no performance to uphold. And without co-conspirators to lean on, the story crumbles. What once sounded like conviction now echoes like delusion in a hollow room. The isolation they're facing isn't just emotional, it's metaphysical. It's not the absence of people that haunts them, it's the absence of illusion. The noise is gone, and all that remains is the sound of a soul finally forced to hear itself. This silence doesn't punish, it reveals. There are no voices left to distort the truth. No crowd to validate the fiction. Each thought now returns unanswered. Each justification dissolves before it can take shape. And for the first time, the weight of every choice made in secrecy is pressing on them with nowhere to hide. Every role they played is melting under the heat of solitude. Every excuse, every blame shift, every mask, peeled away by the very stillness they once mocked. What once felt like superstition now knocks on their door with undeniable presence. The forces they dismissed as fantasy are responding in reality. There are no loopholes here, no shortcuts, No extensions on debts that have been collecting for lifetimes. And while their world disintegrates in layers, something sacred is emerging for you. It's not just restoration, it's ascension. Not just recovery, but reward. Every fragment they tried to erase has returned multiplied, clarified, fortified, and glowing with the quiet proof that divine order never forgets. While they were orchestrating your downfall, the universe was setting a table behind the veil, one only you were ever meant to sit at. The collapse of their plans has become the catalyst for your acceleration. Every closing door in their world is triggering an opening in yours. As their hold disintegrates, unseen streams of opportunity begin weaving into your path. What once felt blocked is now flowing. What once felt delayed is now arriving all at once, wrapped in precision, powered by truth. That legal chaos they used to keep you stuck in confusion? It's about to untangle itself in ways even you didn't expect. The complications they buried in red tape and silence are surfacing as clarity. Decisions that dragged for years are shifting in your favor overnight. Hidden documents are emerging from shadows. People who once withheld the truth are finding their courage. And the scale of what you're about to receive, both tangible and symbolic, will shake the ground beneath every person who ever tried to deny your worth. The dreams they mocked, the work they sabotaged, the doors they slammed in your face, those very things are now returning with momentum so wild, you'll barely be able to catch your breath. Projects you nearly gave up on are blossoming out of nowhere. Ideas you wrote off as too bold are now being sought after. Those very talents they dismissed are echoing across audiences and communities that have been starving for your voice, your vision, your vibration. The delay was never denial. It was preparation. And then there's the connection. The one that felt like a whisper in your soul, even when the world was silent. They knew if you met that person at the wrong time, you'd never realize the magnitude of what you two carry. So they threw decoys at your heart, planted doubts in your vision, distorted your beliefs about love so deeply that you questioned whether you even deserved it. But they underestimated divine alignment. Because now, nothing is stopping the convergence. That bond they tried to bury is rising, stronger, clearer, and fully awakened. Together, you'll ignite what no opposition could ever extinguish. Some connections defy the mechanics of time. And no matter how many delays or detours appear, nothing can erase what was written into your spiritual design. What your adversaries failed to grasp is that destiny has a pace of its own, measured not in clocks, but in readiness. The bond they tried to sabotage wasn't fragile, it was sacred. It simply needed the strength of two souls who had walked through fire alone to recognize what that fire forged in them together. The interference they initiated didn't block the outcome. It refined it. The betrayals they orchestrated became a curriculum in trust. The confusion they planted sharpened your clarity. Every storm they summoned was secretly preparing the ground for something extraordinary. You weren't just waiting, you were becoming. And now that you've stepped into your clarity, nothing and no one can disrupt what's about to unfold. But just before the gates open, there's always a final shadow trying to slip through. In the quiet before your next breakthrough, the ones who helped fuel your pain may circle back, wearing new disguises, speaking softer than before, holding out their hands like peace offerings. Their words will be rehearsed, their tone remorseful, their timing convenient. They'll paint themselves as broken and awakened, as changed and misunderstood. But their return isn't about healing, it's about survival. This isn't a warning built on paranoia, it's a pattern rooted in truth. When those who once drained you feel their own end approaching, they come back not for closure, but for extension. They won't call it manipulation, they'll call it redemption. They'll lean on sympathy to breach the walls your strength built. Don't let their softness confuse you. Their need is real, but their intention isn't pure. They don't seek peace. They seek relief from a justice that finally has their full attention. And if allowed back in, They'll only use your light to delay the night that's already closing in. There comes a time when your safety no longer depends on retreat, silence, or endurance, but on unapologetic clarity. The shield that once required distance is now your truth, spoken plainly and without apology. Your life was never designed for smallness. The intensity of your inner world was never too much. It was calibrated for higher realms. And what some called weakness was always a sacred alert system, guiding you through unseen terrain where few could walk. That heart they mistook for naivete, it was a source of divine restoration. Your ability to sense what others missed wasn't confusion, it was spiritual radar. And now that same radar is tuning itself to precision. What once welcomed everyone unconditionally now filters with wisdom. There is love in turning away. There is mercy in letting go. Some people will only understand the weight of their actions when they no longer have access to the space they once violated. That's not cruelty, it's alignment. Their final phase will be the loudest. The collapse will rattle the field. You'll feel the tremors in subtle ways, sudden dreams, unexpected memories, an ache that isn't yours. These aren't invitations to re-enter chaos. They're signals that justice is being served. Their path led them here, not yours. While they spiral, you are stabilizing. Their panic is the soundtrack to your peace. Let it be background noise to the symphony of your becoming. And your rise? It's not quiet anymore. The resources that once felt blocked are showing up without you chasing. Opportunities are chasing you. That business, that home, that vision you held in the dark, they're now appearing with such force, it feels surreal. What they tried to bury has become your banner. What they mocked has become your gold. And the most ironic part? The very ruins of their empire are producing the raw materials for your next masterpiece. You don't even have to take revenge. The universe has already turned their loss into your legacy. Some awakenings are so profound, they ripple through the collective without a sound. You weren't just surviving, you were broadcasting. And what they failed to anticipate is that your endurance wasn't private. The very people who once hid in shadows, afraid to speak, have been watching you rise in silence. And now, because of you, they're stepping forward, bolder, clearer, unapologetically lit from within. What once seemed impossible is now their blueprint. You've become living evidence that spirit can't be silenced by cruelty. The energy they used to mock, the insight they once called delusion, is now reshaping lives in ways logic can't explain. The things they laughed at in you are now solving problems they couldn't touch. The gifts they tried to bury are now healing wounds they didn't even believe existed. And the empathy they twisted into a weakness? It has evolved into a tool so sharp, so discerning, that even the most carefully disguised intentions can't hide from your gaze. But here's what they never prepared for: the universe recording every technique they used against you, and turning it inward. Every tactic, every script, every manipulative blueprint they tested on you is now running through their own lives like a malfunctioning machine. The confusion they caused in your mind is now theirs to navigate. The silence they forced on you has become their own echo chamber. Their plans are unraveling in front of them, and they no longer have the spiritual scaffolding to hold anything up. The ancestors they once took for granted have grown silent, not out of neglect, but judgment. What once flowed as inner guidance has become an absence that can be felt like a void in the chest. They know something is gone. They just can't name it. They wake up heavier. They second-guess everything. Not because they lack intelligence, but because the protection that once shielded their recklessness has been revoked. And while they try to salvage the pieces, you're watching your life bloom in divine rhythm. Every door they tried to bolt shut is swinging wide open for you. The whispered wishes you once made are arriving at your feet, multiplied, not measured. The very areas where you once felt forsaken are now the places bursting with abundance. And what's poetic is this: Every move they now make in desperation only accelerates your elevation. Their collapse has become the soundtrack to your freedom. Their exit became your entrance. Their downfall opened the sky. The loneliness you once thought would swallow you is now transforming into meaningful connection. Mirrors who don't just recognize your strength, but reflect it. The ache that followed you for years is alchemizing into direction, allowing you to walk through your days with grounded ease. All that was paused is now returning, not in its original form, but upgraded, refined by the heat it had to survive. The ideas that once stalled are now being met with fresh energy and better hands. This time, collaboration feels natural. This time, your vision is protected. Gone are the alliances built on hidden resentment. What replaces them are people who match your frequency, not out of admiration, but alignment. Together, you're moving mountains that once felt immovable because you're finally surrounded by those who would never chain your wings just to feel taller. Your body, too, is reclaiming itself. The fatigue that shadowed you like a ghost is fading. The tension that wrapped itself around your chest is finally loosening its grip. Your sleep is deeper. Your breath flows easier. Your heart is beating without bracing for impact. What medicine couldn't touch, peace has begun to repair. And what stress once broke down, stillness is beginning to rebuild. But the most remarkable shift? It's happening in the spaces you once closed off. The part of you that feared trusting again is now reborn, not naive, but wise. The door is still open, but the locks have changed. You're no longer letting love in out of desperation. You're letting it grow because it's earned its way in. And what's forming now is far beyond romance. It's purpose, it's community, it's divinity holding your hand through it all. Those who once tried to bury your name are now irrelevant echoes. Their images blur. Their stories crumble. They no longer exist in the places you're going. You're not just rebuilding, you're becoming. And what once felt like ruin was actually your rearrangement. The ending they designed for you has become your origin story. Because here's the truth. You weren't just scorched by the fire, they forged you in it. And now that the smoke is clearing, your reflection doesn't look like a survivor, it looks like a force. Soon, you'll glance back at this timeline, not with grief, but with knowing. This was the hinge. This was the doorway. This was the moment everything you prayed for decided to arrive at once. There are stories that change a person, and then there are stories that shift entire timelines. Yours is becoming the latter. It won't just be remembered by those who knew you. It will echo in those who never met you but felt something move in their spirit when they heard your name. What you survived wasn't just an ordeal, it was an initiation. And the ones who tried to script your demise only ended up building the stage for your arrival. They believed they were silencing you, but they triggered the very force they feared. Every time they tried to confine your future, they unknowingly cleared the debris for your destiny. What they saw as the final blow was actually the signal flare that called the universe to your aid. Each attempt to shatter you created the very pressure needed to mold something unshakable inside you. Now the path is wide open. The detours are behind you. Everything that once tried to break your spirit has become fertilizer for your expansion. The silence they forced on you has turned into a voice that others follow. The grief they caused is now the grit behind your glory. And the pain they mocked has become the proof of what can't be undone, your divine alignment. You're not just stepping into the next chapter. You are the next chapter. The journey you endured has qualified you to carry something bigger than yourself. Not just purpose, but legacy. Not just healing, but influence. And every step you take forward is echoing back into the hearts of those who are still wondering if they'll ever make it out. You did. And because of that, they now believe they can too. The closing of this cycle is more poetic than anyone could have written. The very tactics used to break you have returned to sender with a weight they were never built to carry. Their downfall is now the soil beneath your feet. Their undoing, your launching pad. And as their empire fades into silence, yours is singing a song the heavens recognize. The curtain falls on the chaos. The battle is no longer yours. The crown fits now. And the name they tried to stain has become the sound of survival, of purpose, of grace delivered through fire. You were never meant to crumble. You were meant to rise louder than the collapse.